one of the measures that, that is supposed to contribute to performance management, and it's much broader than that. So the conversation that we are having within government is how can we be able to broaden the performance management framework so that it focuses more on productivity, that it measures outcomes and results as opposed to events and processes, which is the current. So that is currently undergoing some review and transformation, and we look forward to the beginning of the new fiscal year to be able to have a new regime that is, one, much broader, and two, that is really focused on outcomes. And performance contracting and performance management tools are supposed to answer to the needs of a particular administration. So what we're also doing is asking ourselves, how can our current performance management framework be a tool for this administration to achieve the, the commitments that we made to our people? Ultimately, we have to do that because the issue of productivity is key. And also, as the chair has said, on the issue of generational equity, that do we want to, as a current generation, to leave all the obligations and all these problems to future generations? I'm going to let me tell you that these fiscal issues, because this ultimately fiscal issue, is actually, it is hiding some real good progress that we are making on other fronts. For example, when we make progress on our exchange rate, when we control our inflation, when we have our GDP growing this year expected at 5.6%, and then that is wiped out by all these fiscal issues that come with recurrent expenditure. And finally, we want to broaden this discussion and ask ourselves, is this just an economic issue? No, for me, it's a moral issue, it's an ethical issue. How can we have 1 million people who are the public servants consuming 41% of our revenues and leaving the other 53 million people to consume 59%? In fact, I would question the other 53 million people. Why are they so patient with us? Because there's a moral issue and there's an ethical issue of how can we have just 1 million people living on the back of another 53 million people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, CS. Wow. Let me move over to the county governments before I come to you, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, Madam Waiguru, the county governments are at an average of 45% wage bill to revenue ratio, according to the financial year 2022-2023. As you serve your last term as governor, what is your parting shot on matters productivity and the wage bill target of 35% in county governments?
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I think it's very interesting, the conversation about the wage bill and what it is that we can do. And I think as a nation, it has come at the right time. Indeed, the county governments at the moment are at about an average of 42%. That means that there are those with a lot higher, and then there are those who with a lot less, closer to 35. But I would like, before even we discuss in broad terms and maybe make proposals, bring us into perspective as to why the wage bill of the county governments has been growing. And I think this has been discussed in the last 2 days here. Just from statistics alone, if you look at health facilities, we started with 8,466 health facilities in 2013. We are now at 16,655. Doctors were at 874. We are now at 4,398. Nurses were at 6,620. We are at 31,923. Extension officers were 1,725, and we are right now at 8,078. And now we have started the UHC program. We are going to increase and include our CHPs into the wage bill. And therefore, with all that and the payments for NSSF and all, this is very critical that we have this conversation of how do we achieve all this, because the things that I have mentioned are indeed critical. And not to mention that we also inherited mostly on the county's side, bloated public services from the defunct local authorities, and those people being protected under the permanent and pensionable. So even if you were to do your restructuring, you would not be able to move them. So you have to increase for critical services that are devolved, and at the same time be able to maintain the current staff that you have. The other very critical issue is that revenues to counties has not been increasing in the commensurate manner. For all the functions that we have, if you look at where our revenues are pegged, they are pegged on audited accounts of maybe 3 years or so behind, as compared to 3 to 2 years behind, as opposed to the current year that has just passed, where the percentage of revenue going to counties will be a little higher. If the percentage of the revenue to counties was higher, and if counties put measures in place to increase their revenue allocation, they would be able to lower the average, the wage bill average per county. But this is one issue that we cannot skirt around. I think we need to have a conversation about functions and resources following those functions. And then, as Chair of SRC has said, maybe we need to look also at our structures and see how they are populated and how do we deal with the issue of rationalizing those structures so that you have critical staff that are required for the critical services that counties are supposed to implement, the functions that counties are supposed to implement. Now, on the issue of my parting shot, what is it that I would say? I think this country needs to look very deeply, introspectively within. Many times we come to conferences and have conversations about what we need to do, but when we go to implement, we implement for the first 6 months or so, and then the resolutions fall by the wayside. A culture of accountability, as has been said, is critical. And those in the public service who have been given the privilege to serve in the public service have to answer that very critical question that has been asked by Moses Kuria. Are we supposed to be spending our resources on unproductive activities as opposed to resources for development? And what is this amount of money that we should cap and say, whether we are a county government or at the national government, what is this figure? And that figure has been said. We have a target right now of 35, but is that the ideal? And finally, inculcating a culture of productivity. I will say in this panel, Your Excellency, if we checked the productivity of the staff, both at national and county level, and especially the middle to lower cadre, you will find that the productivity is very low, because you will find one job that can be done by one person is probably being carried out by 3-4 people. But this is a very sensitive conversation when you're talking about a country where everybody is aspiring to join this public service. Maybe we need to culturalize our people and change the perspective of our people so that we are not all looking to join the public service, and as Chair mentioned, maybe start focusing more on the private sector and informal sectors. And finally, once we set up the structures, once we have them running, maintaining those structures and holding those in leadership accountable, and for us, mentoring, coaching, and passing the skills to younger people so that they understand where we came from when we came to this decision, so that we're not rolling back the gains that we have had. Thank you.
Very well put, Madam Waiguru. Thank you so much for that comment, which flowed very well with discussions we have had, Your Excellency, with the former head of public service, Budhaura, and Oginde on leadership, sir. Your Excellency, which brings me to your question. We were challenged as leadership because most of the people here are leaders in your government. And we were challenged that we talk the walk more than we walk the talk. And so my question to you, sir, is, when we are surrounded and reports have come through of wastage of public resources, wastage in public institutions, impunity, and lagis, give us your thought, Your Excellency. How can we set the tone on accountability, but also consequence management in public service?
Thank you very much, Wangui. And first, let me congratulate the teams that have brought together this conference. I remember we met at the request of the SRC to put together this conference so that we can reflect on the two summits that we had before and how much progress has been made. As has been said here, there has been progress. Came down from 51% wage bill to revenue to 46 now, and we aspire to deal with this challenge in the next 3 years to bring it to 35. And the success of any country, the success of any plan or initiative will stand or fall on leadership. I don't think any one of us need to be persuaded as to whether it is the right thing to do. The questions answered. Is it the correct thing to get our wage bill to 35% as a percentage of revenue? Yes, it's the right thing. Is it doable? Yes, it's doable. Is it easy? No, it's not easy. Right? So it is up to us as leaders to decide whether we want to do this or we want to play to the gallery, we want to talk the walk, as you've said, or we want to walk, or we want to walk the talk. That's the decision we must make. And it boils down to the fact that decisions to be made are not easy. They're not comfortable. They're not popular. And it is the reason why I insist that those of us who are leaders, who have the privilege to be leaders, must understand our calling. We have been elected, all of us seated here, and occupying leadership position, appointed, nominated, employed as leaders. And we have been given responsibility to do the right thing, to make the right decisions, even if they are not popular. And you know, the challenge we've had as a country is that we all know what is right. We have all documented studies, programs, resolutions. But when it's time for the rubber to meet the road, when it is time to implement, it becomes difficult. We have talked about the Abdikadir report. We have talked about the various resolutions of the wage bill before. But we must get to the point where those of us who are privileged to be leaders must be ready to lead, to serve, to make a difference, and not necessarily to be popular. We have a choice to make. And if you want people to clap for you all the time, if you want to be a popular guy, you have an option. You can be a comedian. It's also a very well-paying job. And it boils down to some of the, let me give you two examples. You have a whole cabinet minister. We are having a conversation about drug abuse, alcoholism. then you have leaders who are saying, no, you shouldn't be closing bars. You are mistreating people. Really? Okay, because what are we chasing? Popularity. Okay. The other day, we have a doctor's challenge. We can hardly pay because we've said, you know, there are real issues we want to deal with. You have leaders who it is in their place, including governors, saying we support the doctor's strike. Really? If you support the doctor's strike, pay the money they are asking for. I mean, so we must stop chasing what is popular. We must go after what is right. And so, we have 3 issues from where I sit in this matter of the wage bill. Number 1, we must deal with the numbers. The current ratio is that we have so many support staff, and the push from the public is everybody wants a job. Mr. President, give us positions for the military, for the police, for this, for that. We must be deliberate about creating alternative pathways to employment. Public service is not a place for employment. We must build alternative, and that is why, deliberately, as a government, we have said we're going to implement programs that will create opportunities for employment. And we are going to be deliberate, we are going to be intentional, and we are going to push hard. Under our housing program, our plan is to create 1 million jobs. We are at 140,000 as I talk to this audience. It is a program that we all agreed on. For example, housing was in the manifesto of Kenya Kwanza, it was in the manifesto of Azimio. When it got to implementation, it was a problem. Why? Because we want to be popular. When do you know what the right thing is? We are going to be intentional and deliberate because it is the way we are going to create jobs and not load on Kenyans under the public service. Number 2, we've changed the law. I've signed a new law I've signed the new legislation into law. We're going to create opportunities in the digital space. There are tremendous opportunities in the digital space. That way, we can create alternative pathways and not overload public service. We're going to export our labor. We're going to create jobs in our special economic zones. On Friday next week, I will be in Athi River with American companies who are bringing 20,000 jobs to Kenya because we've given additional incentives on our special economic zones. It is the direction we must go as a nation. I want to encourage us. We have millions of young people out of school, out of college, out of university. They deserve employment opportunities. We owe it to them as a nation to create opportunities for them. It is not in the public service. The public service cannot accommodate all of them. That's why we must be bold, we must be courageous to push the limits in other areas so that we can get more young people in Kenya in employment. They will contribute to baking